You're about to hear one of the most documented, most controversial paranormal cases of the 20th century. A small council house on a quiet street in North London. 2 frightened girls. A mother who begged for help. Police officers, journalists, and paranormal researchers who recorded voices, flying objects, and, some say, outright levitation. Whether you call it a hoax, hysteria, or proof of something beyond explanation, the events at 284 Green Street changed lives and left a trail of evidence no one could comfortably ignore. Stay with me. This is the Enfield Poltergeist. It was August of 1977. Peggy Hodgson was a single mother, working shifts to raise 4 children in a modest council house at 284 Green Street. Life was hard, ordinary. Bills, school runs, tired evenings. Then, in a house built of brick and routine, the routine started to break. At first, a thud in the night. Then, a rocker would tip. A toy would move across the floor. Small, inconvenient things that might be blamed on a loose floorboard. Until they weren't. For Janet, 11, and her sister Margaret, 13, the noises became personal. They heard their names called in voices that weren't their own. They felt fingers tugging at their clothes. They were blamed by neighbors and teachers. But the events kept escalating. One night, Peggy rushed into her daughter's bedroom to find a heavy wooden chest of drawers sliding across the floor by itself. The dresser wasn't on casters, yet it glided, as if pushed by a hand the family could not see. Peggy tried to stop it. The wood resisted her. She felt something hold the furniture back, not just physics, but a force she could not match. She later told investigators she was terrified in a way she had never known. Neighbors called it nonsense. Friends called it attention-seeking. But that single night would mark the start of something sustained, something witnessed again and again. By autumn, Peggy had called the police. 2 uniformed officers visited and spent time in the house. One of them, WPC Carolyn Heaps, later signed a statement saying she saw a chair slide across the floor. Police involvement gave the story a measure of official weight. It wasn't just a family complaint anymore. It now had a formal record. The officers reported items moved, knocks on walls, and the unmistakable fear in Peggy's voice. The presence of police made people outside the family stop and listen. Newspapers smelled a story. Skeptics sat up. Investigators arrived. The house was about to be watched very closely. The Daily Mirror and other tabloids soon descended on Enfield. Reporters entered the Hodgson home with cameras and bright flashbulbs, hungry for a scoop. They left with more than quotes. Some claimed they were struck by flying objects, including a small plastic brick that hit a reporter in the face. Headlines made the family famous overnight. But fame brought scrutiny. With reporters and cameras, the Hodgsons were pushed into the spotlight and into doubt. Was the spectacle being amplified by attention? Or was attention simply revealing a truth that had been there all along? The case caught the attention of the Society for Psychical Research. 2 investigators, Maurice Grosse and Lyon Playfair, took the case seriously and moved into the house for long stretches. They recorded audio, took photographs, and kept detailed notes. Grosse, a soft-spoken but determined man, had lost a child years earlier and threw himself into the investigation with a compassion that blurred professional distance. Playfair, younger and methodical, pushed for as much documentation as possible. Together, they amassed a trove of recordings, over 180 hours of tape. Their work would provide the evidentiary backbone the story relied upon, and it would fuel decades of debate. One of the most unnerving phenomena was the voice. Nights after nights, a voice would speak, deep, hoarse, and male, issuing rude, angry, sometimes mournful comments. The voice sounded far older and larger than Janet, the 11-year-old source. Investigators captured those recordings. When slowed and analyzed, the voice retained qualities that didn't match a child imitating an old man: subharmonics, a timbre and resonance that baffled experts. When asked who he was, the voice said he was Bill Wilkins, claiming he had once lived and died in the same house. The voice knew intimate details the family had never spoken aloud. It wasn't just voices. Toys, marbles, and even larger objects flew across rooms. Photographs were taken showing Janet apparently being thrown from her bed, her body at an angle in midair, sheets and hair suspended. Some witnesses described seeing her levitated inches above the mattress. Critics cried, "Staged photographs," and "attention-seeking." But remember, these incidents were reported by dozens of independent witnesses, neighbors, police officers, reporters, and the investigators themselves. The variety and volume of witnesses made a simple explanation harder to accept. To rule out trickery, investigators staged controlled experiments. Rooms were sealed. Cameras were set up. Test periods were observed with the family away. And sometimes the activity continued. In other moments, when attention was focused, phenomena would amplify as if fed by witnesses. Playfair and Grosse were careful to document inconsistencies. They recorded moments where Janet seemed to fake certain things, and they recorded moments where the phenomena occurred even when deception seemed impossible. This messy mix of authenticity and potential fraud is what makes the Enfield case so stubborn. It resists a clean narrative. Skeptics, led by authors and some journalists, pointed to obvious moments of trickery, times when Janet faked voices or moved objects when she could. They argued the girls were attention-seeking and that the investigators were too credulous. Some investigators even admitted to being emotionally invested. But skeptics faced their own puzzles. Why would children persist for months? Why would physical marks appear on walls? Why would neighboring houses report noises and disturbances? In short, the presence of fraud didn't fully explain away everything. The case was contaminated by human flaws, but it wasn't entirely reducible to them. The truth, it seemed, sat somewhere in the gray between fraud and phenomenon. One of the most chilling confirmations came later. Archival research turned up a man named Bill Wilkins, who had once lived in the house and died there, reportedly from a hemorrhage, several decades earlier. Janet's descriptions of his death and the chair where he allegedly died matched old accounts. For investigators, this was a powerful correlation. For skeptics, it was a coincidence easily explained by suggestion or local lore. Whatever your take, the detail tightened the knot around the story. A voice claimed a name. Records confirmed a name. And the family swore the information wasn't public knowledge before the claim. The months of attention took a toll. The family felt exploited by tabloids, pressured by investigators, and doubted by many strangers. Janet and Margaret grew up under a public microscope. Peggy, exhausted and frightened, eventually left the house. The psychological cost was real. Years later, interviews with the family show a mix of belief, regret, and complex emotion. Janet, now an adult in later interviews, sometimes admitted to faking small things. But she insisted much of what happened was real and terrifying. Her account is not simple confession or simple denial. It's human, messy, and persistent. Playfair's eventual book, Grosse's notes, police statements, tapes, and photographs formed a public archive, a gnarly pile of evidence that scholars and debaters still sift through. Documentaries and dramatizations have revisited the case for decades. The Enfield haunting has become shorthand for modern poltergeist lore. If you sift through the archive, you'll find contradictions, performative moments, and genuine mysteries. People on both sides of the debate cherry-pick what serves their conclusion. And that's the case's enduring power. It refuses the neat answers we crave. By the late 1970s, the activity slowed. The family moved. The house returned largely to silence. But the story didn't end. Many years later, visitors and paranormal enthusiasts still report small chills and odd sensations when passing the address. The house, like a bruise on memory, keeps returning in whispers. Janet would later say the haunting followed us for years. Whether that was literal, psychological, or a mixture of both depends on who you ask. But some things are clear. Lives were altered, evidence was made, and a case that began in a modest council house became a modern legend. So what should you believe? That children were manipulative and the whole thing a staged circus? That malevolent spirits took possession of a council house? Or that something stranger, a complex mix of stress, attention, genuine unexplained events, and cultural factors, produced a uniquely messy haunting? The Enfield case refuses to let us be comfortable. It demands we hold uncertainty. Some evidence points one way, some another. The most reasonable position may be the one many investigators quietly adopted. There were fabrications, yes, but also events that resisted simple explanation. If the afterlife exists, perhaps it speaks in broken ways, through grief and error, and the small human places we least expect. If it doesn't, then Enfield remains one of the most convincing examples of how human belief, fear, and attention can create the very phenomena we dread. Either way, the house at 284 Green Street left its mark. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more real case files and tell me in the comments. Are you convinced the Enfield Poltergeist was real or a masterful fraud? Thanks for watching. Keep your lights on